meditation really was what cracked my heart open, and it made me more just more open-minded, and I was able to see what scratching the surface felt like of the healing process, and I was like, wow, if this is just the taste, what if I just dive in?
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Lost and Found, a podcast all about the process of creative recovery. From those low lows to the high highs, this podcast explores what it means to be a truly creative person and how creativity is a superpower that we all have that we can use for our own well-being and transformation. I'm your host, Brooke Eston. I am thrilled to welcome Nicolette Ghariadeh to today's show. Nicolette is a feminine embodiment and intimacy coach. She serves as a powerful guide for women on their healing journeys. What started out as an exploration of her own healing journey quickly evolved into a full-on creative transformation. After spending 7 years working in the adult entertainment industry as a stripper, she became increasingly aware of the parts of herself that she was starting to heal, and consequently made bold decisions across all areas of her life so that she could better align with the true self that she was uncovering. Now, Nicolette is working full-time as a women's coach, offering private one-to-one coaching, and is currently working on a guided group program that covers feminine healing topics such as self-love, sensuality, relationships and intimacy, and feminine expression. Nicolette and I met at a retreat in Italy a few years ago that was hosted by the incredible Rachel Rosito. She is a divine feminine coach and a client of mine. We met through Nicolette's twin sister, Claudia, who participated in Rachel's 6-month-long divine feminine coaching program. It was called Evoke, which we reference in the show. Evoke culminated in an intimate in-person retreat in Italy. Although Nicolette didn't have the context of the 6-month journey that we had all been on, she immediately felt like a dear soul sister and fit right into the group. Since our experience together in Italy, I've been fortunate enough to witness her profound, beautiful, and wholehearted transformation. To follow along on her journey, you can follow on Instagram with the handle Nicolette MG. And without further ado, here's Nicolette. Welcome to Nicolette to the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited, and I'm so honored. I'm so honored that you asked me to be here. You have so much wisdom, and I love getting to talk to you. You're just like one of the most thought-provoking people that I know, and so wise. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So you and I first met in a very intense and dense container full of, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20, 25 other women who had been part of a 6-month journey with an incredible woman that we both know very well, Rachel Rosito.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent, I guess it was only a few days, but it felt like we went into some type of portal of transformation where every single woman brought her whole self to the experience, right? Like the epic successes and power that we all have, and then also the deep, dark, swampy insecurities and traumas that we're still trying to process and move through. And during that time, we were able to connect, we were able to bond, and I have been witnessing the transformation that you've been going through since that very intense first encounter that we had. Before we get into the creative transformation that you've gone through in the last few years, I would love for us to dive into its origin. And let's go back to when you were a little girl and check in around how your creativity first started expressing itself.
I remember when I was, we're talking back, let's say like fifth grade, I was, I loved to paint, I loved to create art, and I loved writing poetry. I loved rhyming poetry, and I used to be have a competitive edge. So I used to be in like poetry competitions, and I loved to illustrate like my poems. And I don't know if I've mentioned yet, but I have a twin sister. And so when we used to create things together, there's always this thing where people would compare like whose is better, or I would compare it myself, because you start to see other people comparing in your environment and you become a sponge. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, I need to compare myself to my sister. And I remember that having an effect on the way that I was able to create. And also, I had a home life where my dad was very hypercritical, and um, and it was explosive. And so I think I instilled like a subconscious fear of expressing myself and my creativity, and fear that it wouldn't be good enough for my dad, or that I just in general wasn't good enough for my dad. And I think also having um, my home environment being so unstable really, there has to be like you said, like you kind of nurture, you have to like nurture, was something that we mentioned before the podcast, was nurturing your environment for your creativity just the way that you would nurture your health.
Do you have a sense? I guess it's a two-part question. Did you have a sense then of what that fear was? And then do you have a sense now of what that fear was? Like, what were you afraid of?
Hmm. And expressing when I was younger, well, I think being bullied in school, for sure. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. That is a very, very common aspect of what kills our self-expression, or what kind of hinders it as we grow older and we start to realize that we are being judged, and there are opinions flying at us from every angle. But really it was the societal piece of it, like in school being judged, but also like my dad, like I mentioned, he was very hypercritical. And it was never about my art, but it was like, if I wasn't smart enough in school, if I didn't understand my homework, it was, it was a very, it was not a healthy interaction and communication. So it was like not being smart enough, not being good enough in general. And I think as I've gotten older, I've seen that play out, especially as I've ventured down this road through entrepreneurship. It shows up as imposter syndrome. And a lot of people can relate to that piece, because you're like, well, who am I? Am I good enough? Who am I to teach this? Do I know enough? Am I expressing this in a way that's going to be received well? Are people going to know it's authentic? And I've really that piece, I've had to just come back to, reminding myself that it doesn't matter how it's received. As long as it's coming from an authentic place, it doesn't matter how it's received. And if it only reaches a couple of people and it helps one person, that's all that really matters to me. It's really like taking the focus off of myself and refocusing on the message and who I'm trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think with what you said around imposter syndrome is so interesting, because this fear seems to shapeshift, right? Like at first you're scared that, oh, no one's going to understand me, or people are going to judge me, or I'm going to draw unwanted attention to myself and it's just going to be bad. And then finally, when you do allow yourself to be seen and you express yourself, then this new fear sort of enters, and the original fear shapeshifts into something else. But what we fail to realize is that everybody feels that way. Like literally everybody. It doesn't go away. It just changes form, and you learn how to evolve your relationship with it so that it doesn't own you anymore.
Oh gosh, that is so, so true and so beautifully said. I actually just recently had that thought. I was like, God, that was so great. That was such great content. And I'm like, how am I how, now? And then you feel the pressure, the expectation that it's got to be just as good as that was. And you're
Mhm.
right. It is just about, um, evolving your relationship as it ebbs and flows and as it changes in so many different forms, and it never goes away. And you learn this with so many different aspects of creative work. It's
Yeah.
just like, it's not going to go away. You just have
Mhm.
to figure out new ways to move with it,
Yeah.
you know, and keep your balance and your inspiration flowing, because
Yeah.
like that can kind of kill the spark, the motivation to to create more.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. And
and
I
I'm
think,
I'm curious, how has that been? How do you? What's another way that you, when you've like felt that you're losing the inspiration or something, or you're feeling that fear, the contraction in any way,
yeah.
how have you moved through that? What are
Mm.
some ways in which you move through that contraction process?
Well, I usually make it worse to start. And I do that by looking at all
Oh,
of the other people who have done all the things that I want to do. And I obsessively go through their content, their website, their portfolios. And then I realize what I'm doing. And I get off of my devices and I get back to my journal. I get back to deep, intimate relationships that I know I can show up with that energy and not be judged for it. And I remind myself that I need to put in the time and the energy and the commitment. And I usually just reaffirm something that I already knew, but I kind of lost sight of because there was so much um, kind of debris in my field of vision that I couldn't see the end goal anymore. And I reorient. I'm learning to go through that cycle a lot faster as I have more experience. And that's why, like, I put so much value on resilience and redemption. Like, fuck perfection. Nobody's perfect. And that's an unachievable goal anyway. That is like, I'm never striving for perfection. I'm
totally.
showing up and trying to do that the best that I can, knowing full well not everybody's going to like it. Like,
Right.
I know that from the beginning, and I have to just remind myself that's okay. People can
Yep.
self-select out. Like, I don't need anything from anybody. That's not why I'm doing this. And I have to drop back into myself, and ultimately where I go is to a place of service.
It's not about being perfect. It's the art of redemption. It's the
Yeah.
art of how the hell you bounce back.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. And for me, it's been a lot of the same thing, where I realize that I'm in my head and I'm seeing myself from an outside perspective, but it's not my voice. It's like the voice of the inner critic. And a tool that I learned in Evoke that Rachel taught us was, like, labeling that inner critic and giving it a name and sort of detaching from it, and seeing it from a different perspective, so that we're not identifying it so much when it does come up to
Yeah.
tell us, to stop us in our tracks. So I love that, and really getting back into our bodies, dropping out of our
Yeah.
heads and back into our bodies.
So
That's key.
important.
It's so important, and I've that has been the most the best way for me to come back to center, and to come back to my creativity.
Do you feel like your story, there was a dramatic shift, or was it more like a kind of a slight change of course that happened over a long period of time?
Yes, the journey. That's
Yeah,
where the juice is.
sure
That's the
is.
important. That's the juicy stuff. And it was it's been quite a journey. It started, I would say, well, because I grew up in such a fragmented home, and the environment that I grew up in, where there was chaos and, um, really, just a lot of hate. I learned to self abandon, and as a way to protect myself. And So I was self-destructive in the way that I was treating my body, my heart, my mind, my spirit. I was drinking a lot. I was going to clubs. I was kind of in the dancer lifestyle. I was a stripper for 7 years, and although I never like fully lost myself in that, I always had a pretty decent head on my shoulders. But I definitely was very disconnected from myself. I was sleeping around. And not in a conscious way at all. I was just, yeah, just very disconnected from my body. And I think where I really decided that it was time to make a change was having felt like I was at my wits' end with the unhealthy relationships that I had in my life. I think above all else, above most things, are your relationships impact your life the most dramatically, the most drastically. And so, and I wonder if there have been people on your podcast who have talked about heartbreak and how that, because that's always such a big catalyst for change. It's feeling like, okay, and because it can it disrupts your whole life. Who you choose as a partner can either make or break. You know, it determines your life, the trajectory of your life. So I was
Yes.
making a lot of, yeah, unconscious choices in my relationships. And so I just wanted to find some inner peace. And that was, it was a breakup that I was experiencing. Um, it was a very familiar pain. It was a pain that I felt so many times before. And I saw my sister find her inner peace with Rachel. And so that's when I hired her. And from there, it was sort of like the snowball effect. You know, it was learning like how to soften into my feminine. And from there, I was able to and learn mindfulness practices like meditation. And meditation is really what like switched. It was the switch in my brain. For me, I don't know if I would consider myself like I don't think I'd be able to create if I personally didn't meditate, because that is what keeps me really in tune with my inner world, my inner realms, and that's where I'm able to create from.
Yeah.
So um
Yeah, that's beautiful.
meditation, oh man, that was the turning point in my life. I remember
Yeah.
the first time I meditated, I went for 2 hours. It was like it was
Wow.
yeah it was such a profound experience. I came out of it and it was like my soul it was telling me it's been time. And so it let me rest. And it was the deepest peace I have felt after all the turmoil I had experienced. So that was, I meditated and I came out of it and I cried for about, I don't know, 40 minutes on my kitchen floor.
Yeah.
And it was just been uh, a snowball effect ever since
Yeah.
of good things. And, you know, the negative, the not so fun experiences, but I'm able to navigate that in a different way now. So,
Yeah.
um,
The
yeah.
the metaphor that I use when talking about that in particular is excavation. Like if you excavate a archaeological site, it's really dirty. It's really messy. Like everybody's in the mud. There's dust everywhere. There's a lot of kind of debris and all of that. But it is the only way to reach what was buried underneath. There is no
Hmm.
other way.
Yes. Yes. God, that's so true. And it kind of goes back to like the only way out is through, right? And so like when you're feeling these emotions and you're crying and it's like the cry of panic, like nothing's going to be okay. And there's a different cry when you are using the tools that you've learned to self-soothe, to navigate your emotions and what you're going through from a place of centeredness, from love and self-compassion. Um, and yeah, from there, I think that's where we find the gems. Like, you know, we're finding the purpose through our pain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Oh man, I've been there so many times, and it's always it's so often it's a romantic relationship, but it's also been
Yeah.
a part of like healing the relationship that I've had with my father
Yeah.
and finding forgiveness
Mm.
and and really coming back to compassion. Once I found compassion for myself, I was able to find it for the people who have hurt me. And so that's where like navigating heartbreak and navigating those really deep lows has been life changing.
Hmm. Yeah. So I would love to hear your story of how you got from that like ugly shower cry, the mascara all down everywhere, like it's never going to end, to a place where you were even open to what your sister introduced you to with Rachel and Evoke, the program that we did, because that's like you didn't ease into it. Like you didn't dip a pinky toe in the pool, like you dove in headfirst in the deep end. So I would love to hear more of how you got to a place where you were even open to doing that. Or maybe that's a
Mm.
characteristic you've always had of like, go big or go home. I don't know.
I honestly, that it's kind of a mixture of both. I think I've always had that, like, I just love to try new experiences, and I have always done well with uncomfortable situations. And I think it's because I'm able to like relate to people so deeply that I can understand it, and I try to come from a place of non-judgment. But I'm always open to like new experiences because um, I, they blast you open. And I think being also like a stripper for 7 years, I think that really got me real comfy in being in, different situations, just a lot of different situations and dealing with a lot of different people. Um, so, so there's that piece, but also I think that meditation really was what cracked my heart open, and it made me more just more open-minded, and I was able to see what scratching the surface felt like of the healing process, and I was like, wow, if this is just a taste, what if I just dive in? But I used to deal with heartbreak in a very different way. I and so hmm, I used to slap a band-aid on a leaky pipe. That's what I like to call it. And so I used to go to a ball. I would immediately hop on Bumble or Tinder, and I was swiping. I would spend so much of my energy and time swiping. I was going to bars and taking shots and, hooking up with the cute guys. And that to me it was just very unfulfilling, but it filled a void for, those moments. And then I just realized that what I wasn't healing was just showing up through different humans, through different relationships. It was the same pain with different humans. And I'm like, it's not even this, face. It's something within myself that I need to heal. Um and and I knew that I had to heal a lot of my abandonment wounds, and they're never fully healed. So I'm not sitting here saying that I'm fully healed and I'm perfect. It's just um but I knew that I had to make some internal changes if I wanted to see a different reality. And so um I learned how to recover from my heartbreaks differently,
Yeah.
like sitting with myself, actually, learning the tools to navigate these really, really difficult emotions, because we're never taught these things. Like, and it's like criminal that we're not taught how to do these things when we're younger. Um, but really it just came back to like sitting with myself and moving my body and having spiritual practices in place and having like that anchor. I think if the creative process for me would be so different if I didn't have an anchor. And I'm sure you have your anchor too, like your altar space, the place where you can come to in the beginning of your day and cultivate your own essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can
So
can you share a little bit about what you mean by altar space, and then
um,
what it like how it looks, and kind of give people a bit of a visual of it, and then
mhm.
what relationship do you have to it?
It's a place where we get to drop in and cultivate our essence. So for me, having an altar space is having um, being surrounded by things that I find beautiful. So, like flowers, a candle, incense. Really, for me, it's about igniting all of my senses. So, and for me, that's a way to prime my brain, to drop in and to find safety.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for me too, to have a physical space that grounds me. It's been really helpful for me to have a physical place, and mine is literally just a little stool, like a
Mhm.
like a kitchen stool, and I put a scarf over it, and I put some rocks and some seeds and some notes and some incense and palo santo and stuff that just um that is slow and intentional and
Mm.
grounding, and just being in that physical realm, it helps me also to drop into my senses and to be able
Yeah.
to drop into that space. Like I do my meditations in the morning, it's the first thing that I do, and having that physical connection and grounding, I can feel the difference like night and day between when I do it and when I don't.
Oh my God. Yes. Same. Same. Absolutely. It's changed my life. It's like it's a time to slow down. It helps you to remind yourself that that's what you need. And um and that's so important. It really sets the tone for your whole day.
I think it would be really interesting to get into what you've mentioned at several points in this conversation through different ways around embodiment and your senses. So, as you have mentioned your 7 year experience as a stripper, where that is, I mean, it's all about the body. Like you are a body that is available for other people's pleasure and other people's enjoyment. And the way that you're feeling inside is not particularly relevant because you're looking for an outcome. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you have shifted your relationship with being body focused and in your body, less for other people's um, needing or wanting something from you, and more into a place where it feels more soul aligned. So, as you're now moving into a place where you are starting to align more of your financial world with this type of embodiment work, I would love to kind of drop into how you made that shift and what and how that looks like.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, that is that's such a good question. And I'll start. There are a couple of things, but I'll start with um, what you mentioned about what, like using our bodies, using our bodies, our sexuality, our sensuality to attract something outside of ourselves, and something like money or attention. And I actually I talked to my sister about this recently. It's about there are different archetypes that we embody as women and as the feminine, and there is light and there's the dark, and like we've mentioned before, neither are good or bad, but one of them serves us a little bit more and in a healthier way, right? And so there's like the erotic shadow, like the part of us that manipulates our environment to get what we want. We seduce men, we to make money or for validation. A lot of times, even without being a stripper, it's external validation. We see that a lot in our culture. It's very prevalent. um, and that comes a lot from the place of the wounded feminine. It's coming from a place of lack or feeling not worthy enough. um, as a dancer, I sort of had to, because I was still connected with my body, I had to disconnect at work. And so while I was a dancer, it became increasingly difficult as I started doing this work, because I started doing this work while I was dancing. It became increasingly difficult to compartmentalize, those two things. And also, it just even when you're tapping into it and it's just for a few hours, you're kind of carrying that into your real life in insidious ways. That happens. Um, and so really, and so there's the second archetype, which is the like the queen archetype, the seductress that doesn't have to. She magnetizes what she wants through the feminine, um, effortlessly. She doesn't have to flaunt or manipulate, and that's what I've been. Those are the practices that I've been cultivating in the last couple of years, and I think really um, not dancing has helped. Being out of that environment has definitely helped. Um, but really wanting to move away from it was because I was learning what the healthy version of that looked like, and how it just wasn't conducive with, you know, what I wanted to teach. But there is an aspect of it that Claudia and I are actually looking to carry into our programs and our teachings. And it's the art of, it's like more like tantric principles. So it's the art of the sacred lap dance. And,
Mm.
instead of like hopping up on stage and not thinking about being in your body, you're actually tapping into your body and into your senses and using sensuality rather than sexuality to, um, to become more magnetizing in our feminine. And so, yeah, it's the art of tantric lap dance. It's like learning how to use your breath and like orgasmic breath work and feeling into our senses and, you know, using sensuality, because sensuality and sexuality are very different. Your sensuality is you tapping into your senses. You can do that when you eat a piece of fruit. You can do that when you're eating a strawberry, and you can like make love to your strawberries. I do that now. I'm like, when I eat my food, I'm really tapping in. And so, yeah, that's been the journey. That's been
Yeah.
the journey between, and I'm so grateful for what dancing has provided for me. It taught me so much. And, it's kind of cool being able to like now seduce women instead of men in a
Yeah.
healthy way, like teaching women how to seduce themselves rather
Mm.
than trying to seduce a man to get what
Yeah.
I need.
So
So,
what does that mean? Can you unpack that for us a little bit more of what does it mean to seduce yourself?
mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, this is kind of like going back to balancing that feminine and masculine energy. Seducing myself for me was like, that's why when I mentioned like having an altar space would be like where it's you create beauty and reverence. Like for me, that's seducing myself, putting on soft, you know, elegant clothing that makes me feel good. Whatever it is that makes you feel good. Adorning myself. That's like seduce. That's what I consider seducing myself. And going back to the feminine and masculine, for me, part of feeling more whole in myself was bringing the union of masculine and feminine energy together. So, cultivating a disciplinary practice, through the masculine, that's the masculine, right? Like structure, discipline, sitting ourselves down, having a practice, mindfulness, being in stillness. But for me, I had to use the feminine energy to like seduce myself into the mat. They were like seducing each other, and so that was me like being seduced by my own masculine and feminine,
Mm.
and that was a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge learning for me also in understanding the value of both the masculine and the feminine, because I think like a lot of ambitious women, we lean very hard into our masculine and we sacrifice a lot without really realizing it. But so much of our culture talks about femininity as being either weak or being something that is a complement or an accessory to the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we don't talk
Yeah.
so much about the feminine power in and of itself in a way that doesn't fit into the masculine mold, right?
Right.
Like really successful women lead like men, right? They're women, they physically look like women, but their energy space tends to be more masculine. And we have fewer and fewer examples that are so visible and so ubiquitous that really demonstrate the power of the feminine in a way that honors the sacredness of the feminine rather than the cultural capitalistic manifestation of it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah. And that's so true. Like we, we're taught that the feminine is like, being sexy and being the good girl, and that we are a complement to the
Yeah.
masculine. Every person carries more energy in one area than the other. Some people are heavier in their masculine and than their feminine, and they feel better that way. But there always has to be some sort of balance. And but we also live in a society where, um, the masculine needs healing too. We can't have the healing of the feminine without the masculine. And men are we're taught to go, like that is the mentality, and that's what makes you successful. And don't show your feelings. And now we see this dance between the feminine. The feminine's like, no, I want you to express, and the masculine's like, but I don't know how, I wasn't taught. And
Yeah.
it's
And I'm scared you're going to reject me if I do. Right?
exactly. A lot of men feel that way too, where they're just like, yeah, well, and there are women who are very wounded, and they're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to see you cry. Like that's
Yeah.
not a man to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but really, that always comes back to just having, knowing how to hold your own emotions and knowing how to hold the masculine or the feminine in their emotions. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I think what you said earlier around compassion, more compassion and less judgment.
we have to create a safe enough environment for the masculine and the feminine to soften and to be receptive. Like that.
Yeah.
That takes um, it takes practice, but it also takes being with the right person, with the right people, the people that make us feel safe. My goal is to see a world where we know how to love better, um, and we feel safe enough to express all of ourselves and all of our emotions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think it happens at various stages of our lives, because I can tell you that just yesterday, um, so I have a stepdaughter. My partner has a daughter who is 11 now. And yesterday she got upset about something, and I was in the other room, and she started to cry. And when I walked into the room, she like immediately turned around, like she didn't want me to see her crying.
yeah,
And she's 11.
we're
And
taught so young to just hold it all in and hold it back.
right,
Breaks my
right.
heart.
Yeah. And so when I could sense that okay, maybe she needs a little bit of space, maybe just let her and her dad work out whatever this problem was. Um, and I went back into the other room, and I could overhear my partner speaking to her. Um, and he said, it's safe to cry in front of Brooke. If you want to cry, she's like the best person to cry with. I cry with her all the time.
Aw.
And I
My
thought,
heart.
I know. And I
Corazón.
thought, like, I was in the other room listening to that, and I thought, who would I be if my father said that to me? And to be able to create an environment that is safe and stable, but also leaves all the room that she needs, that he needs, that I need for emotional expression. I thought, gosh, who is she going to be that she has that as a model?
Yeah, wow, that's so beautiful. It's like the way I feel that, you were like, who is she going to be? Now this is the example that she is seeing. Like this is what's set for her.
Yeah.
And honestly, and then my hope for her is a secure attachment style.
Yeah.
No one's perfect, but a secure attachment style as she gets older, because that, you know, she's not seeking, she's not like, because she's being provided the healthy masculine, like the support and the love and the that openness, she isn't going to need to feel, hopefully she wouldn't need to feel the need to seek that outside of herself from the masculine.
So as we are wrapping this podcast up, I would love to hear a little bit about how you've been able to bring all of these different experiences that you've shared with us into helping guide other women towards this work and through this work. And yeah, just what sort of patterns or insights or wisdom you might have for women who have listened to the podcast thus far and are thinking, oh wow, I identify with so much of what Nicolette said. I didn't even, what is this masculine and feminine? What? Like, I don't know what format my healing needs to happen in, but this is resonating with me.
I would say that when I work with women in this realm, it's the first thing we do is really find a way to ground ourselves and to root ourselves into the earth, so that we can get to the shadow work and the nitty gritty of like the codependency, the attachment styles, all of the things that come after that. But what I like to always guide women with first is finding their footing, finding safety within their bodies, finding safety within their environments, you know, rituals, finding practices, teaching mindfulness and meditation, and then really learning, becoming really aware of like what our attachment styles are, how we relate to people, and why. A lot of people are living in autopilot. They're through old conditioning and not really understanding, why they keep finding themselves in situationships or in unhealthy relationships. And my goal is to help women find their empowerment, find their power in dating, and finding that within themselves. So, finding a really strong sense of identity, a strong sense of sovereignty. Sovereignty is like the biggest word that I use, because when we learn how to self-source our own love, and that's like after we find the grounding, that's where we start to learn how to self-source our own love through different healing modalities, inner child work, inner child healing, shadow work, learning to love the parts of ourselves that we find really hard to love, and bringing that into a place of wholeness, finding a lot of self-acceptance. And when we start to self-source our own love, that's where we get to enter the dating world from a place of, okay, I've got me always. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if you ghost me. It doesn't matter if, I fell hard and it didn't work out. I've got me, and I have the tools to be able to come back to center and to come back to my heart space. And you were saying that the heart space is it's the core of everything. It's how we create in this world. It's how we express ourselves. It's how we love. It's how we give and receive love. And so it's really how open can we remain in our hearts and healing our hearts. And that's another part of the journey that I love to take women through, is like healing our hearts, finding a connection to our womb spaces, connecting to different parts of our bodies that we've ignored. We don't have a relationships with our womb. So many of us don't. And we hold a lot of like our trauma there, and sexual trauma. And so, it's really coming back to a place of self-sourcing our love, wholeness. And I just want to see better love in this world. I want to see higher conscious relationships, higher love partnerships, where we are not just meeting people from a place of wounding and, trauma bonding. We all trauma bond to a certain degree, to a certain level, but how much awareness do we have around it? How can we relate to people in a healthier way? and do better in love, do better in dating. I came to this place because I got so sick and tired of getting dating wrong. It was all a learning process, and I'm grateful for it, but it wasn't working out. And I'm like, there has to be another way. And a lot of it is just like inner union with our different. Yeah. So
That's beautiful.
yeah,
And I would love to, I mean, it feels very related to that. If you have any wisdom or kind of hard-earned advice that you wish that you could tell your younger self, or maybe somebody who's at an earlier stage of their reinvention process, their creative identity building, their masculine and feminine union, however we want to label it. But what would have been helpful for you to hear when you were younger, or maybe helpful for somebody else at an earlier stage?
It's a beautiful question. And it might sound cliche, but it all starts with you. It starts with the relationship that we have with ourselves and nurturing that relationship and making it the number one priority, because in relationships and creating what you want in this world, it all comes down to the way that we relate to ourselves and in nurturing that relationship. Don't be so stubborn. When you can't figure something out, ask for help. and that's where it took me 27 years to find my coach, and to actually be like, oh, there's somebody always further along and on my journey, on the journey that can help us. That's what we're here for. That's what humans, I think that's the purpose of every human on this earth. Whether it's you make it your job or not, our purpose is to help and to be in service of others. So take that opportunity if you ever see it. If you get a ping from the universe that this is where you can learn a lot from someone, listen and find stillness. That's what I wish I would have told. That's something that I really would have benefited from as my younger self. Like, find stillness, go within, and get curious.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for going there, like for being so vulnerable, being so raw, revealing so much about your story and how you arrived to this place, and being so clear and vocal about your intention and ultimately what you're trying to create in the world. It feels very clear. It feels like it's coming from a place of alignment. And I personally have no doubt in my mind that you are going to get there. Even if it is just one person, two people, three people, like the energy is out there, the intention is out there, and I trust completely in your ability to bring it to fruition.
Thank you so much. You are so sweet, so kind. Thank you for your words of encouragement. You are like, if you were ever you would make the best mom. You have like such a beautiful heart. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast, and for also sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, if you want any more information about any of our guests or the show notes or anything we discussed on today's episode, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.